Today, we're diving deep into the world of ancient Rome, but we're not talking about gladiators or emperors. We're talking about dinner. Because for the Romans, a meal wasn't just about eating. It was a performance, a power play, and a social battlefield. So let's get into it.
So just imagine this. You walk into a dinner party, and where the host tells you to sit basically announces to the entire room how important you are, or how unimportant. That was the reality in ancient Rome. A big dinner, called a cena, wasn't just for getting full. Nope, it was this elaborate show, all designed to flash your wealth and lock in your social status.
Okay, so to really get how this all worked, we have to start with the stage itself. The setting for a Roman dinner party was designed from the ground up to show everyone exactly where they stood in the social pecking order. And that stage had a name, the triclinium. This was the formal dining room, and its whole design was centered on one thing: throwing the perfect dinner party. The layout was almost always this U-shape with three big couches set around a central table where all the food would go. The word triclinium actually gives the whole game away. It comes from Greek and it literally means three couches. See, guests didn't sit up straight in chairs like we do. They would recline on these couches while they ate. This U-shape was also super practical, leaving one side open so servants could easily bring dishes in and out. Now, this seating arrangement was anything but casual. It was basically a living map of everyone's social rank. That middle couch, that was the prime spot, reserved for the most honored guests. The host would sit on the lower couch, not because they were less important, but so they could easily chat with everyone. The other spots were filled up based on your rank. And enslaved people, they didn't even get to recline. They stood or sat on the floor.
And get this, the social hierarchy went way beyond just where you sat. A host might pour you an amazing, expensive wine if you were on the VIP couch, but serve a much cheaper wine to the guests on the less important couches. Your status literally determined what was in your cup. So you're in the right spot. You've got the right wine, but what would you actually be eating? Let's get to the main event, the Roman social highlight of the day, the cena.
A proper Roman cena was a long, drawn-out event, and it was structured almost like a three-act play. First up was the gustatio, which was the appetizers. You know, things like eggs, olives, maybe some salad to get you started. Then came the prima mensa, the main event, with all the heaviest dishes, often with several kinds of meat or fish. And finally, you'd finish with the second mensa, which was dessert, fruit, nuts, and sweet pastries.
So what were they working with in the kitchen? Well, the ingredients were all about what you could find in the Mediterranean. The absolute foundation of their diet was grains, grapes, and olives. On top of that, you had common veggies and fruits. And if you could afford it, meat like pork and fish were popular. Oh, and since they didn't have sugar, honey was the go-to sweetener for everything.
But there was one flavor that was uniquely, powerfully Roman. An ingredient that was so common, it ended up in almost every savory dish you can imagine. It was this potent, incredibly salty, and, well, kind of funky fish sauce called garum.
Okay, so what was garum? Well, it was made by fermenting things like fish guts and blood with a whole lot of salt. I know, it sounds pretty intense, but its job was to add this deep, savory umami flavor, kind of like how we might use soy sauce or fish sauce today. It was a huge business, and they shipped this stuff all across the Roman Empire.
All right, so we've got the room, we know the seating chart, and we know what's on the menu. But how were you supposed to act? And what did you do for fun? A cena could go on for hours, so it was about a lot more than just eating.
Roman table manners were super specific. Rule number 1, you always reclined on your left elbow. That left your right hand free for eating. And yes, you ate with your hands because forks weren't a thing yet. That's why all the food was conveniently pre-cut into bite-sized pieces in the kitchen. Spoons were only for liquids, and it was considered really good manners to wash your hands often, with servants bringing around bowls of scented water between courses.
And the wine? It was flowing constantly, but Romans almost never drank it straight. In fact, they thought drinking undiluted wine was totally barbaric, so it was always mixed with water, sometimes warm, sometimes chilled. This also had the side benefit of making the local water a bit safer to drink. And of course, a good host had to provide top-notch entertainment. As the night wore on, you might see musicians playing, professional dancers, or even acrobats doing their thing. If it was a more highbrow crowd, you might get some poetry readings or philosophical debates. But really, the most prized entertainment of all was just good, lively, clever conversation. Now, it is so important to understand that everything we've talked about so far, the fancy dining rooms, the three-course meals, the acrobats, That was the reality for a tiny, super wealthy slice of the population. For pretty much everyone else, dinner looked very, very different.
So let's just put these two worlds side by side. While the rich were reclining on couches, the poor were sitting on stools in tiny apartments that usually didn't even have a kitchen. Instead of an epic cena, their main meal was often just a single bowl of thick grain porridge. The wealthy ate exotic meats and drank fine wine. The poor ate bread, a few cheap veggies, and whatever they could buy from a street stall. It was a tale of two completely different dinners.
And that porridge was called pulse. This stuff was the absolute backbone of the diet for the Roman masses. Just picture a simple, filling mush made from ground wheat boiled in water. It definitely wasn't exciting, but it delivered the basic calories people needed to get by. In fact, for hundreds of thousands of people living in the city of Rome, survival was only possible because of something called the grain dole. This was basically a government program that handed out a monthly ration of free grain. People would then take that grain, grind it into flour, and make either bread or that pulse porridge. It was a basic safety net to keep people from starving. So if there's one thing to take away from all this, it's that in ancient Rome, what you ate, where you ate it, and how you ate it sent the loudest possible message about your place in society. From an over-the-top cena to a humble bowl of porridge, food was the ultimate status symbol. In their world, your dinner plate was a public statement about power and status. And that kind of leaves us with a big question to think about. What does our food and the way we eat say about us today? Thanks for joining me.